This isn't a charity flight, and I don't have time for your little games. The words cut through the low hum of the cabin like shattered glass. They weren't whispered. They were projected, sharp and venomous, intended to shame. In the plush, hushed world of first class, where the air usually smells of expensive leather and warm lavender towels, the silence that followed was deafening. Sitting in seat 3A was not an unruly passenger or a drunk tourist. It was Maya Brooks, a 13-year-old girl wearing her Sunday best, a pressed navy blue dress that had seen better days and a backpack that looked far too heavy for her slender shoulders. She wasn't causing a scene. She wasn't yelling. She was trembling, clutching her armrests so tightly her knuckles had turned white. All she had asked for was a ginger ale because her stomach was turning flip-flops from the turbulence. But the flight attendant standing over her, a woman whose name tag read Patricia, loomed like a storm cloud. She looked at Maya not as a paying customer, but as a stain on her pristine upholstery. "You people always want something for free," Patricia sneered, her voice dripping with a casual cruelty that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd said it. Maya shrank back, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her whole. But what Patricia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that 4 rows back, in the cramped confines of economy comfort, a man in a faded Detroit Tigers baseball cap was watching. He had a clear line of sight through the curtain gap. He saw the finger pointing. He saw the girl's tears. And most importantly, he was recording every single pixel of it. That man was Elias Thorne. And with one phone call, he could turn Patricia's entire world into ash. Welcome back to the Justice Lens. We uncover the stories the world tries to hide. Today, we are taking you onto a flight where a dream journey turned into a nightmare of discrimination, only to be saved by the ultimate undercover boss. If you believe that justice should be served cold and that no child deserves to be bullied, go ahead and hit that like button right now. And if you're new here, smash subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the truth. Let's find out what happens when you mess with the wrong passenger. To understand why Maya was sitting in a $3,500 seat she could barely afford, we have to go back 72 hours to a small, drafty apartment in Detroit, Michigan. Maya Brooks wasn't your average teenager. While the other kids in her neighborhood were obsessing over TikTok trends or saving up for the latest Jordans, Maya was different. She saw the world in numbers. Geometry, calculus, advanced physics. These were languages she spoke more fluently than English. At 13, she was a prodigy. Her parents, David and Sarah, worked themselves to the bone to support that gift. David spent 12 hours a day on an assembly line, his hands permanently stained with grease, while Sarah cleaned office buildings downtown until 2 in the morning. They were tired. They were always counting pennies. But they were rich in the only currency that mattered, hope for their daughter. When the letter arrived inviting Maya to the National Mathematics Olympiad in Los Angeles, the house erupted in joy. It was the golden ticket. The winner would receive a full-ride scholarship to any university in the country. For the Brooks family, this wasn't just a competition. It was the exit strategy from poverty. But reality hit hard. The competition was days away, and flight prices were skyrocketing. An economy ticket was $800, money they barely had. But Sarah had a thought that kept her awake that night. She whispered it to David in the dark. "David, she's never flown alone. She's terrified of heights. She's going to be competing against kids from prep schools and private academies. She's already going to feel small." David rubbed his tired eyes. "Sarah, we can't afford more." "I can take extra shifts," she insisted, her voice breaking. "We can. Borrow from my brother. Let's get her first class. Just this once. Let her walk into that competition feeling like she's worth $1 million. Let her feel like she belongs." And so, they did the unthinkable. They drained their emergency fund. They borrowed. They scraped. They bought the $3,500 ticket not for the champagne or the legroom, but for their daughter's dignity. On the morning of the flight, the air in the Brooks apartment was thick with nerves. Maya stood in front of the hallway mirror, smoothing down her navy dress. Her grandmother had bought it for Easter, and it was the nicest thing she owned. "You look like a professor," her dad said, choking back tears as he handed her a worn leather backpack. Inside was her tablet, loaded with practice equations, and a sandwich wrapped in foil, just in case. "Remember," her mom said, gripping Maya's shoulders, "you have a ticket just like everyone else. You belong in that seat." Don't let anyone make you feel different. If only Sarah knew how hard that promise would be to keep. Meanwhile, in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline, a very different morning routine was underway. Elias Thorne, the 42-year-old CEO of Zenith Airways, stood in his massive walk-in closet. He wasn't reaching for his bespoke Italian suits. Instead, he was digging for a pair of frayed jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. Elias was a man who had built an empire from nothing. He grew up on the South Side, raised by a single mother who scrubbed floors so he could go to college. He knew what it felt like to be invisible. He knew the sting of being judged by the color of your skin before you even opened your mouth. 3 weeks ago, an encrypted email had landed in his private inbox. It was from a whistleblower inside his own company. The subject line read, "The culture of rot." The email detailed allegations that made Elias's blood run cold. It claimed that on certain routes, flight crews were systematically mistreating minority passengers, ignoring their requests, and prioritizing white passengers regardless of ticket class. Complaints were being deleted. Evidence was being lost. Elias didn't want to believe it. Zenith Airways was supposed to be different. But the whistleblower had attached video clips. Grainy, shaky footage of rude dismissals and subtle snubs. Elias knew he couldn't fix this from the boardroom. If he sent a memo, people would just hide their behavior. He needed to see it. He needed to feel it. So he booked a middle seat in economy on Flight 447 to Los Angeles, the same flight Maya Brooks was boarding. He pulled the baseball cap low over his eyes. To the world, he was just another guy trying to get to the West Coast. Nobody looked twice at him. And that was exactly how he wanted it. At the airport, the contrast between Maya and the other first-class passengers was stark. Businessmen in sharp suits barked into their phones, while women with Louis Vuitton luggage breezed through the priority lane. Maya clutched her boarding pass like a shield, her eyes wide, taking in the chaos of the terminal. When the agent called for first-class boarding, Maya hesitated. She stepped forward tentatively. The gate agent paused, looking at her ticket, then at her, with a raised eyebrow. "You're in first class?" the agent asked, voice flat. "Yes, ma'am," Maya whispered. The agent shrugged and scanned it. "Go ahead." It was a small slight, barely a scratch, but it was the first crack in Maya's armor. She walked down the jet bridge, her heart pounding a rhythm against her ribs. "I belong here," she told herself. "Mom said I belong here." She stepped onto the plane and turned left. The first-class cabin was beautiful. Wide leather seats, soft jazz playing, the smell of fresh coffee. She found seat 3A. It was enormous. She carefully placed her backpack underneath the seat in front of her, mindful not to touch anything she wasn't supposed to. That's when she met Patricia. Patricia was the lead flight attendant for the premium cabin. She had been flying for 10 years and wore her seniority like a weapon. She was greeting a man in 2A with a dazzling, rehearsed smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Champagne? Mimosa?" Then, she turned to seat 3A. The smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. Her eyes scanned Maya from her braided hair to her scuffed sneakers. There was no warmth. "No, welcome aboard. You need to keep the aisle clear," Patricia said sharply. "Get settled quickly. We have a schedule." Maya blinked, startled by the tone. "Oh, okay," she stammered, sliding into her seat. "And make sure that bag fits all the way under," Patricia added, hovering over her. "I don't want to have to check it at the last minute." Maya shoved the bag deeper with her foot, her face heating up. She looked around to see if anyone else noticed, but the other passengers were buried in their phones. Back in row 23, Elias Thorne was settling into his cramped window seat. He had a direct view through the mesh divider into first class. He had seen the interaction. He couldn't hear the words yet, but he saw the body language. The way Patricia leaned into the other passengers, but leaned away from the young girl. The way her face hardened. He felt a familiar knot of anger tighten in his chest. "So it begins," he thought. He reached into his pocket and adjusted his phone. He had a special app running, one that allowed him to record with the screen blacked out. He propped it up against the tray table latch. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety demonstration played. The engines roared to life. Maya looked out the window, watching the ground fall away. For a moment, the wonder of flight overtook the fear. She was flying. She was going to Los Angeles. But 20 minutes into the flight, the smooth ascent turned into a jarring chop. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged on. The plane dropped, then lurched sideways. Maya's stomach dropped with it. She swallowed hard, tasting bile. The motion sickness she had feared was hitting her like a tidal wave. She felt dizzy. Hot saliva pooled in her mouth. She needed water. She needed something to settle her stomach. She waited, hoping a flight attendant would walk by. She saw Patricia in the galley, laughing with the pilot who had stepped out for a moment. Patricia was holding a pot of coffee, looking relaxed. Maya raised a trembling hand and pressed the blue call button. Ding. She waited. 5 minutes passed. The turbulence bumped them again. Maya groaned quietly. She pressed it again. Ding. Finally, Patricia appeared. She didn't look concerned. She looked annoyed. She marched down the aisle, ignoring a man who held out his empty glass, and stopped at Maya's row. Yes? Patricia asked, crossing her arms. What is the emergency? I don't feel well, Maya whispered, clutching her stomach. Please, could I have some ginger ale? And maybe some crackers? Patricia let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. She looked at the call button light, then back at Maya. The mask of customer service slipped off completely. You people always want something for free, she said, her voice rising over the engine drone. This isn't a charity flight. The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. In the back, Elias Thorne stiffened. He had heard that. He checked his phone. The recording light was blinking steady red. He wanted to unbuckle his seatbelt. He wanted to storm up there and fire her on the spot. But he knew he couldn't. Not yet. If he stopped it now, it was just one rude employee. He needed to see how deep the rot went. He needed to see if the system would correct itself, or if it would crush this little girl. So, with a heavy heart, he stayed in his seat and watched. And what he was about to see would make him question everything he had built. As the aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude, the cabin filled with the savory aroma of rosemary chicken and warm sourdough. The meal service in first class was a choreographed ballet of luxury. Maya watched, her stomach growling despite the nausea, as Patricia moved down the aisle with a silver cart. For the man in 2A, there was a linen napkin, polished silverware, and a choice between the salmon or the steak. He was offered a glass of Pinot Noir, which was topped off before he could even ask. And for you, Mrs. Vance. Patricia beamed at the woman in 2B, placing a porcelain plate of warm bread rolls on her tray. Extra butter, just how you like it. When the cart finally reached row 3, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The smile vanished from Patricia's face. She didn't offer a menu. She didn't offer a hot towel. Instead, she reached into the bottom shelf of the cart and pulled out a crinkled plastic bag. She dropped it onto Maya's tray table with a dull thud. Inside was a generic, cling-wrapped sandwich that looked like it had been bought at a gas station 3 days ago, a small packet of dry crackers, and a lukewarm bottle of water. Maya stared at the sad little package. She looked at the steaming steak the man across the aisle was cutting into. Excuse me, Maya said softly, her voice trembling. I think there's a mistake. This doesn't look like. Well, everyone else has a hot meal. Patricia didn't even blink. That's all we have left for your ticket type, she lied smoothly. Maybe next time your parents should book earlier if you want the premium options. This isn't a cafeteria. It was a blatant fabrication. There was no such thing as a limited meal ticket in first class. But before Maya could process the humiliation, Patricia turned to the woman across the aisle. Mrs. Vance, would you like another dinner roll? We have plenty in the galley. I know how much you love them. The woman accepted gratefully. Patricia returned seconds later with a warm roll and a complimentary chocolate truffle. Maya sat in stunned silence, holding her stale sandwich. The message was brutal and clear. We have food. Just not for you. For rows back, Elias Thorne was seething. As the CEO, he knew the catering manifest by heart. He knew exactly how many meals were loaded onto Flight 447. There was a surplus of 5 premium meals today. He watched Patricia's cruelty not just as a bystander, but as a boss watching an employee destroy his company's reputation one interaction at a time. He wasn't the only one noticing. In the galley, Roger, the flight manager, was reviewing paperwork. A junior flight attendant named Chloe approached him, looking uncomfortable. Roger, she whispered, glancing toward the curtain. Patricia is being really aggressive with that girl in 3A. She lied about the meals. We have plenty of chicken left. Roger didn't look up. Patricia has been flying this route for 5 years. She gets the job done, he grunted. Don't start drama, Chloe. These passengers exaggerate everything anyway. Just let it go. Roger had the authority to stop it. Instead, he chose to look the other way, proving that the rot in the company wasn't just about one bad apple. It was the soil they were planted in. Back in seat 3A, the stress was taking a physical toll on Maya. The turbulence returned, shaking the plane violently. The combination of the stale smell of the sandwich, the rolling motion, and the sheer anxiety of being targeted caused her chest to tighten. She couldn't breathe. Her hands started to shake uncontrollably. It wasn't just motion sickness anymore. It was a full-blown panic attack. She felt faint. The edges of her vision blurred. Terrified she might pass out, she pressed the call button again. This wasn't about comfort. It was a medical necessity. Patricia arrived, but she didn't bring a medical kit. She brought a scowl. I think I need a doctor, Maya wheezed, clutching her throat. I can't breathe. Stop being so dramatic, Patricia announced loudly, her voice carrying through the cabin. I've seen your type before. Always causing a scene, looking for attention. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a nasty hiss. Are you doing this to get a free upgrade? Or maybe a lawsuit? Because that's not going to work here. Excuse me. The voice came from seat 1A. The elderly businessman, Mr. Henderson, had finally seen enough. He lowered his newspaper. Miss, that child looks genuinely ill. Perhaps you should show some basic human compassion instead of lecturing her. Patricia's demeanor flipped instantly. To the white man, she was apologetic and submissive. Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to disturb you. I'm just trying to manage a disruptive passenger. She offered him noise-canceling headphones to block out the noise, treating Maya's medical distress as nothing more than a nuisance to the real customers. But the tide was turning. Across the aisle, a woman in a sharp blazer stood up. She held her phone high, the camera lens pointed directly at Patricia. This was Elena Rodriguez, a high-profile civil rights attorney. And she had seen enough. I am an attorney, Elena announced, her voice steel. And I am documenting what appears to be a medical emergency being met with negligence and racial discrimination. I suggest you rethink your next move very carefully. Patricia froze. For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. But she didn't know the half of it. Because behind the curtain, the man in the baseball cap was preparing to make his move. Humiliation has a way of making time stand still. For Maya, the flight seemed to stretch into eternity. She had managed to calm her breathing after the attorney's intervention, but her body had other needs. She had been sipping the lukewarm water to settle her stomach, and now, the inevitable happened. She needed to use the restroom. In any other situation, this would be a mundane non-event. In first class, the lavatory was 3 steps away, a spacious, clean facility reserved for the 12 passengers in the front cabin. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, her legs wobbly. She took 2 steps toward the front galley. Suddenly, Patricia materialized from nowhere, blocking the aisle like a bouncer at a nightclub. Excuse me, she snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet cabin. Where do you think you're going? Maya froze. I need to use the restroom. Patricia didn't move. She crossed her arms, glancing at the occupied sign, which was clearly unlit. The first-class lavatory is out of order, she lied without hesitation. It's currently being serviced. It was a clumsy, hateful lie. Maya had seen the man in seat 2A exit that very restroom not 3 minutes ago. But Patricia's eyes dared her to argue. You'll need to use the facilities in the rear of the aircraft, Patricia commanded, pointing toward the long, narrow aisle leading back to economy. But, I'm in first class, Maya whispered, confused by the arbitrary rule. My ticket says, I know what your ticket says, Patricia interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. But I'm telling you where the working restrooms are. The economy lavatories are perfectly adequate for you. Defeated, Maya turned around. She had to walk the entire length of the plane. Passing through the heavy curtain that separated the classes felt like walking through a wall of judgment. She walked past row 10, row 20, row 30. Heads turned. People whispered. To them, seeing a first-class passenger walking all the way back here was odd. Seeing a young black girl doing it while looking terrified was concerning. As she passed row 23, Elias Thorne looked up from his tablet. He saw Maya, looking small and fragile, clutching her side. But then he saw something that made his blood boil. Patricia was following her. She wasn't just sending the girl to the back. She was escorting her, like a prison warden transporting an inmate. She was marching behind Maya to ensure she didn't cause trouble. When Maya reached the rear lavatory, She slipped inside and locked the door, grateful for the momentary sanctuary. But her peace was short-lived. Patricia positioned herself right outside the door, leaning against the galley wall. She began talking loudly to a junior flight attendant, making sure her voice carried through the thin plastic door. "You have to watch these types," Patricia said, loud and clear. "They're always looking for ways to damage property or smoke in there. I wouldn't be surprised if she tries to graffiti the mirror." Inside the small, cramping space, Maya covered her ears. Tears streamed down her face. She wasn't a vandal. She was a math prodigy. She was a daughter. Why did they hate her so much? Then, Patricia crossed a line that turned policy violation into criminal harassment. She banged on the door with her fist. Bang, bang, bang. "Hey, what's taking so long?" Patricia yelled. "Other passengers need to use this facility." There was no line. The aisle was empty. "I'm almost done," Maya cried out, her voice shaky. "Well, hurry up," Patricia barked. "And when you come out, leave the door cracked. I need to inspect it immediately to make sure you didn't steal anything." That was it. The breaking point. A man in seat 32C stood up. His name was Marcus, a father of 3 from Detroit. He had been listening to the harassment for 5 minutes, and he couldn't take it anymore. "Ma'am, that is enough," Marcus said, stepping into the aisle and towering over Patricia. "You need to leave that little girl alone." Patricia recoiled, shocked that a passenger would challenge her. "Sir, sit down. I am following security protocols." "Security protocols?" Marcus scoffed, his voice rising. "You are bullying a child. What security risk does a 13-year-old girl pose in a bathroom? She is terrified." The commotion drew the attention of Roger, the flight manager, who came hurrying from the front. Elias watched intently. This was the moment. This was the test. Would management fix it? "Is there a problem here?" Roger asked, looking between Marcus and Patricia. "Yes." Marcus pointed a trembling finger at Patricia. "Your flight attendant is harassing a minor. She's accusing her of crimes and banging on the door while she's inside. It's abusive." Roger looked at Patricia. Patricia gave him a "can you believe this" look. Roger sighed and turned to Marcus. "Sir, our crew is trained to spot suspicious behavior. If she felt the passenger was lingering too long, she has a right to check. Please return to your seat, or I will have to write you up for interfering with a flight crew." The cabin erupted. "Are you kidding me?" someone shouted. "We all saw it," yelled another. Phones were out everywhere now. Flashlights beamed. Elias Thorne recorded it all. The systemic failure was complete. The manager hadn't even asked the girl's side of the story. He had blindly protected the abuser because it was the path of least resistance. When Maya finally clicked the lock and opened the door, she found herself in the middle of a shouting match. She looked at the sea of angry faces and the camera lenses pointing at her. She shrank back, terrified. But this time, she wasn't alone. Marcus stood between her and Patricia. Elena, the lawyer, had made her way to the back and was loudly citing federal aviation statutes to Roger. And quietly, unnoticed in the chaos, Elias Thorne saved the video file, uploaded it to his private cloud, and prepared to end the charade. He had the evidence. Now he needed the justice. Here is part 4 of the story. Part 4. The sound of breaking the walk back to first class was less of a retreat and more of a procession. Maya wasn't walking alone anymore. Marcus, the father from economy, walked a few paces behind her, his glare fixed on the back of Patricia's head. Elena, the attorney, walked beside her, whispering words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Maya. Just breathe. We are all witnesses. You are safe now." When they reached the curtains separating the cabins, Roger, the flight manager, tried to stop the entourage. "Sir, ma'am, you cannot enter the first-class cabin. You need to return to your seats," Roger insisted, blocking the aisle with his clipboard. "We are just ensuring this child returns to her seat without being harassed further," Elena said, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Unless you want to add unlawful imprisonment to the list of complaints I'm already drafting?" Roger faltered. He stepped aside, allowing Maya to pass, but his eyes narrowed. He was losing control of his aircraft, and he blamed the 13-year-old girl, not his abusive staff. Maya collapsed into seat 3A. She was exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her trembling and cold. She pulled her knees up, trying to make herself as small as possible. She just wanted the ground. She just wanted her mom. But Patricia wasn't done. Emboldened by Roger's support in the back of the plane, and furious that a child had caused a scene that questioned her authority, she decided to deliver one final, crushing blow. She waited until Marcus and Elena had reluctantly returned to economy. She walked past Maya's seat, collecting trash. She paused, leaning in close so only Maya could hear, her voice a poisonous whisper. "I hope you've learned your lesson about causing disruptions on my flight," Patricia hissed. Maya didn't look up. She stared at her shoes. "Maybe next time," Patricia continued, savoring the cruelty. "Your family will think twice before booking seats you can't afford and clearly don't deserve." It was a sentence that would cost her everything. Because 4 rows back, the recording had never stopped. Elias Thorne had heard every syllable, and something inside him finally snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying click of a safety being disengaged. Elias stood up. He didn't rush. He moved with a deliberate, heavy calm. He took off his faded baseball cap and set it on his seat. He straightened his t-shirt. "Sir, the seatbelt sign is on," a flight attendant in economy chirped. Elias ignored her. He walked up the aisle, his eyes fixed on the gap in the curtain. He moved like a predator entering a clearing. He swept the curtain aside and stepped into the hushed luxury of first class. The sudden appearance of a man in jeans and a t-shirt made several passengers look up. Patricia was standing near the cockpit door, organizing magazines. When she saw him, her eyes went wide with indignation. "Sir," she barked, marching toward him. "You cannot be up here. This is a restricted cabin. Return to your seat immediately." Elias didn't even look at her. He walked right past her, as if she were a ghost, and knelt beside seat 3A. "Maya," he said softly. Maya flinched, expecting another lecture. She looked up and saw a man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "My name is Elias," he said, keeping his voice low and soothing. "I've been sitting behind you. I saw everything that happened, and I want you to know that none of this is your fault." Maya looked at him, tears welling up again. "I just want to go home," she whispered. "I know," Elias said, "and we're going to get you there. But first, I need to make sure you're okay. Do you need water? A real meal? A doctor? Sir." Patricia was now shouting. She grabbed Elias's shoulder. "I am calling the captain. You are trespassing in a premium cabin." Elias stood up slowly. He turned to face her. He didn't brush her hand away. He simply looked at it until she let go, unnerved by the intensity of his gaze. "Actually," Elias said, his voice echoing in the silent cabin, "I think there are some things we need to discuss." Roger, the flight manager, came running from the galley, breathless. "What is going on here?" Roger demanded. "Sir, you are causing a disruption. If you do not return to economy right now, we will have law enforcement meet the plane." Elias smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a wolf who realizes the sheep have nowhere to run. "A disruption?" Elias repeated, tilting his head. "Mr. Roger Vance? That is your name, correct?" Roger blinked, startled that this stranger knew his full name. "How do you—" "The only disruption on this flight," Elias continued, his voice rising just enough to command the entire room, "has been the systematic abuse of a 13-year-old girl by your crew, and your refusal to—" "Stop it. I don't know who you think you are," Roger sputtered, trying to regain control, "but you are about to be arrested." "You want to know who I think I am?" Elias asked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, black smartphone. He didn't look at Roger. He looked at the passengers, the ones who had watched and done nothing, and the ones like Mr. Henderson who had tried to help. "Let me show you exactly who I am." He dialed a number on speakerphone. It rang once. "This is the CEO's office. How may I help you?" A crisp voice answered. "James," Elias said, staring directly into Patricia's terrified eyes. "This is Elias. I need you to patch me through to the chief of operations immediately. Tell him it's a code red." "Mr. Thorne?" The assistant's voice on the line was unmistakable. "Yes, sir. Right away." The cabin went deadly silent. The name, Thorne, hung in the air. Patricia's face drained of all color. Roger's clipboard clattered to the floor. The man in the baseball cap wasn't a passenger. He was the owner. And Judgment Day had just arrived at 30,000 feet. The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute. It wasn't the quiet of sleep. It was the suffocating, heavy silence of a courtroom right before the verdict is read. Every eye was fixed on the man in the faded t-shirt and the smartphone resting in his palm. "James," Elias said into the phone, his voice steady and cold as ice. I am currently on flight 447. I need you to listen very carefully. I'm listening, Mr. Thorne. The voice on the speakerphone replied, crisp and clear. I want you to pull the employment files for lead flight attendant Patricia Miller and flight manager Roger Vance immediately. Patricia let out a small, strangled sound, like a balloon losing air. Her hands flew to her mouth. Roger stood frozen, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. I have them on my screen, sir, James replied after a few seconds of typing. Good, Elias said. I want you to prepare termination papers for both of them, effective immediately upon landing. A gasp rippled through the cabin. Patricia's knees buckled, and she grabbed the back of seat 2B to stay upright. Sir, James asked, his professional tone wavering slightly. On what grounds? Elias looked directly at Patricia. Gross misconduct, harassment of a minor, civil rights violations, and willful negligence. He continued, ticking off the offenses on his fingers for the whole plane to see. I have spent the last 3 hours documenting these employees systematically discriminating against a 13-year-old passenger named Maya Brooks. I have video evidence of them denying her food while serving others, fabricating maintenance issues to force her to use economy restrooms, following her into lavatories to harass her, and making explicitly racist comments about her ability to afford her ticket. Oh my God, the woman in 2B whispered, looking at Patricia with disgust. James, Elias's voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerous. I want you to understand something. This isn't just happening on a flight. This is happening on my airline. These people are abusing a child on my plane. Understood, sir, James said, his voice hardening. I will have security and legal meet the aircraft at the gate. We are initiating a full internal audit immediately. Do it, Elias said, and ended the call. The click of the phone locking sounded like a gunshot. Patricia finally found her voice. It was high and hysterical. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Mr. Thorne, please, she sobbed, stepping toward him with her hands out. I had no idea who you were. I swear if I had known, I never would have. I'm so sorry. Elias looked at her, and his expression didn't soften by a fraction. Ms. Miller, he said, cutting her off. You didn't discriminate against Maya because you didn't know who I was. You discriminated against her because you thought she was powerless. He stepped closer, his voice ringing with authority. You thought she was a nobody. You thought she had no voice. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You don't belong in the sky. You don't belong near people. Patricia sobbed harder, realizing her career was over. She looked to the passengers for sympathy, but found only cold stares. Then Roger tried. He straightened his blazer, attempting to salvage his dignity. Mr. Thorne, he said, his voice trembling but trying to sound professional. I think there has been a misunderstanding. I was simply following protocol based on the information I had. I can fix this. We can write the passenger a voucher. A voucher? Elias laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. You think you can fix the trauma you caused a child with a coupon? He stepped into Roger's personal space. I watched you, Roger. A passenger came to you for help. A father stood up and told you a child was being abused. And instead of investigating, you threatened him. You chose to protect the bully because it was easier than doing what is right. There is no misunderstanding, Elias said finality. You are done. Get out of my sight. Go sit in the jump seat and do not speak to another passenger until we land. Roger slumped, defeated. He turned and walked to the galley, stripped of his power and his pride. The cabin erupted. Mr. Henderson in 1A started clapping. Then the woman in 2B joined in. Soon, the entire first-class cabin was applauding, not for the service, but for the justice. Elias didn't acknowledge the applause. He turned his back on the crew and knelt down beside seat 3A again. Maya was staring at him, her eyes wide as saucers. She was still trembling, but the fear was replaced by awe. Maya, Elias said, his voice instantly gentle again. I want you to know something very important. He waited until she looked him in the eye. What happened to you today was wrong. It was illegal, it was cruel, and it was not your fault. Not for 1 second. I own this airline, Elias continued, placing a hand over his heart. And I take full responsibility for what my employees did to you. You should never have been treated that way. You belong here. You earned this seat. Maya sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you, she whispered. I thought. I thought I did something wrong. You did nothing wrong, Elias said firmly. You handled yourself with more dignity than any adult on this plane. And because you were brave enough to endure this, we are going to make sure it never happens to another kid again. You're going to help us change this company, he promised. For the first time in 4 hours, a genuine smile broke through Maya's tears. It wasn't just relief. It was the realization that she wasn't invisible anymore. The most powerful man on the plane had just become her shield. Elias stood up and addressed the cabin one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, he said to the stunned passengers, I apologize for the disruption. Please enjoy the remainder of the flight. The drinks are on the house. He sat down in the empty seat next to Maya, seat 3B. He pulled out his tablet. Now, he said, smiling at her. I noticed you were working on some pretty advanced calculus before all this started. Do you want to show me what you're working on? I used to be pretty good at math myself. Maya's eyes lit up. She reached into her bag and pulled out her tablet. And for the last 20 minutes of the flight, the billionaire CEO and the math prodigy from Detroit didn't talk about lawsuits or firings. They talked about numbers. But as the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the real storm was waiting on the ground. The video Elias had uploaded was already spreading. The press was waiting. And the world was about to learn exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong people. The descent into Los Angeles is usually marked by the captain announcing the local weather and the time of arrival. But on Flight 447, the intercom crackled to life with a message that would be remembered for years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez from the flight deck. The voice boomed, sounding unusually grave. I have been informed by our CEO, Mr. Elias Thorne, who is on board today, of the unacceptable events that occurred in our cabin. On behalf of the entire flight crew and the company, I want to offer a sincere apology to our passengers, and specifically to Ms. Brooks. The captain paused, the weight of the words hanging over the rows of seats. We will be met by airport security upon arrival to handle the personnel involved. Please remain seated until the authorities have boarded the aircraft. Thank you. The cabin buzzed with whispers. Patricia sat in the jump seat, her face buried in her hands, weeping silently. Roger stared blankly at the bulkhead, his career dissolving before his eyes. When the wheels touched the tarmac at LAX, there was no rush to grab overhead bags. There was a sense of anticipation. As the plane taxied to gate 42, flashing red and blue lights were visible through the windows. The seatbelt sign pinged off. But before anyone could stand, the main cabin door opened, and 3 uniformed TSA officers and 2 airport police officers boarded the plane. They didn't head for a rowdy passenger. They walked straight to the galley. Patricia Miller? Roger Vance, the lead officer asked. Yes, Roger croaked, standing up shakily. Please come with us. We need to take your statements regarding an incident of harassment and potential endangerment of a minor. The walk of shame was absolute. Patricia, who had spent hours looking down on Maya, now had to walk past every single passenger she had served. She shielded her face from the dozens of smartphones recording her exit. The irony was bitter. She had threatened Maya with security, and now security was escorting her off the plane. Once the crew was removed, Elias stood up. He didn't rush to leave. He turned to Maya. Ready? He asked, offering a hand to help her with her heavy backpack. I think so, Maya said, taking a deep breath. She looked different now, taller, somehow. The fear was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who has walked through fire and survived. As they exited the jet bridge and entered the bustling terminal, the scene was chaotic. News of the CEO undercover incident had leaked mid-flight via social media. A small cluster of reporters and cameras was already gathering near the baggage claim, held back by airport security. But Maya didn't care about the cameras. Her eyes scanned the crowd of waiting families until she landed on 2 familiar faces. Mom, Dad. David and Sarah Brooks were standing by the arrival barrier, looking exhausted and anxious. They had driven their old sedan almost nonstop across the country to be there for the competition, unable to afford 3 plane tickets. They had arrived just hours before her flight landed. Maya dropped her bag and ran into her mother's arms. Sarah held her daughter, so tight it looked like she would never let go. David wrapped his arms around both of them, burying his face in Maya's hair. We were so worried, Sarah cried. You didn't answer your phone. We heard. We saw things online about the flight. I'm okay, Mom. Maya said, pulling back and wiping her tears. I'm really okay, but there's someone you need to meet. She turned and pointed to the man in the jeans and baseball cap, standing respectfully a few feet away. This is Mr. Elias, Maya said. He owns the airline. And he saved me. David Brooks, a man who had spent his life working hard for very little recognition, looked at the billionaire. He saw the way Elias looked at his daughter, not with pity, but with respect. Mr. Thorne, David said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out and shook Elias's hand. Thank you. I don't know what happened up there, but thank you for watching over my baby. Mr. Brooks, Elias replied, holding the handshake firmly. Your daughter is remarkable. She handled herself with more grace than my own employees. You raised a warrior. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, metal business card. He handed it to Sarah. I want you to call this number tomorrow, Elias said. We are going to make this right. Not just with an apology. Skyline Airlines is going to cover your stay in Los Angeles, your transportation, and we are going to talk about Maya's education. I don't want you worrying about a single bill while you are here. Sarah looked at the card, then at Elias, unable to speak. We have a lot of work to do to fix my company, Elias added, looking at the news crews setting up their tripods. But today, the most important thing is that Maya is ready to win that competition. As the family walked away toward the exit, escorted by Elias's personal security team to keep the press at bay, the story was already exploding online. The video of Elias firing the crew mid-flight had hit Twitter and TikTok. It had 2 million views in an hour. The hashtag Justice for Maya was trending #1 worldwide. Back at the airline headquarters, the PR department was in a panic. But Elias wasn't panicked. He was calm. He knew that the next 24 hours would be brutal for the company's stock price, but they would be the most important hours in the airline's history. He was about to burn the old culture to the ground and build something new from the ashes. The fallout was swift, brutal, and necessary. By the time the sun rose over Los Angeles the next morning, the footage from Flight 447 had been viewed over 50 million times. It wasn't just a viral video, it was a cultural moment. The image of the billionaire CEO kneeling beside a crying teenager in first class, while his staff looked on in terror, became an iconic symbol of accountability. Zenith Airways faced a firestorm. Stock prices dipped, and the PR lines were jammed. But Elias Thorne didn't hide behind press releases. He went on live television. He didn't make excuses. He didn't say mistakes were made. He looked into the camera and said, "We failed, and I am personally going to fix it." Within 48 hours, the culture at Zenith began to shift. The Patricia Miller incident wasn't treated as an anomaly, but as a symptom. Elias implemented mandatory, rigorous bias training for every single employee, from the baggage handlers to the boardroom. He established a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and created an independent passenger advocacy office to investigate complaints directly, bypassing middle management like Roger Vance. But while the corporate world was reeling, a much quieter, more important victory was taking place in a university auditorium in downtown Los Angeles. 3 days after the flight, Maya Brooks walked onto the stage of the National Mathematics Olympiad. The room was filled with hundreds of students, judges, and parents. The air was thick with tension. In the front row, David and Sarah Brooks sat holding hands, their knuckles white. Next to them, in a seat reserved for special guests, sat Elias Thorne. He had cleared his schedule. He wouldn't miss this for the world. Maya stood at the podium. She looked tired. The emotional toll of the flight hadn't completely vanished, but her eyes were clear. She wasn't the scared girl in seat 3A anymore. She was a mathematician. The final problem was displayed on the screen. It was a complex calculus derivation that stumped half the room instantly. Maya picked up her pencil. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the judges. She looked at the numbers. And for the first time in days, everything made sense. The chaos of the world faded away, leaving only the beautiful, logical certainty of math. She wrote furiously. When the buzzer sounded, she set her pencil down with a steady hand. When the results were announced, the room held its breath. In second place, from Detroit, Michigan, Maya Brooks. The applause was thunderous. Maya beamed. She hadn't won first place, but she had secured a full-ride scholarship to the university of her choice. She had secured her future. As she accepted her trophy, The moderator asked if she wanted to say a few words. Maya adjusted the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, then found Elias in the front row. 3 days ago, Maya began, her voice ringing out clearly. Someone tried to make me feel like I didn't belong in a seat I had paid for because of the color of my skin. The room went silent. They tried to make me feel small. But that same day, I learned that there are people who will use their power to build others up, not tear them down. She lifted her trophy. Today, I'm standing here as proof that excellence has no color. Intelligence has no race. And no matter what anyone tells you, you belong in any room you are smart enough to enter. Elias felt a lump in his throat. He had closed billion-dollar deals and merged companies, but nothing felt as significant as this moment. 6 months later, snow was falling on the streets of Chicago. Elias sat in his penthouse office, the city lights twinkling below. His assistant walked in with the mail. "Personal letter for you, sir. From Michigan." Elias opened the envelope. It was a handwritten note on lined paper. "Dear Mr. Elias, I hope you are doing well. I wanted to tell you that I started the Advanced Aerospace Engineering program this semester. It's hard, but I love it. I also wanted to say thank you. Not just for the scholarship, or for firing those people. Thank you for showing me that power should be used to protect people, not hurt them. Because of you, I learned that my voice matters. Someday, when I'm successful enough to help someone else the way you helped me, I will remember that true leadership means standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves." Sincerely, Maya. Elias folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer, right next to his first dollar. Zenith Airways eventually became known as the most inclusive airline in America. Elias's handling of the crisis became a case study in business schools worldwide. But for Elias, the legacy wasn't the stock price or the reputation. It was the knowledge that somewhere out there, a brilliant young woman was reaching for the stars because he had simply decided to do the right thing. The story of Flight 447 proves that justice can come from the most unexpected places. It proves that one voice can spark a movement, and that sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one shouting, it's the one listening. True power isn't about what you can take. It's about who you can protect. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Maya and Elias. It's a powerful reminder that we all have a choice in how we treat one another. Here is my question for you. If you had the power that Elias had, what is one change you would make to ensure the world is a fairer place? Let me know your vision in the comments below, because real change starts with a conversation. If this story moved you, please like this video to help spread the message. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about truth, justice, and the resilience of the human spirit. Until next time, remember, treat everyone like they matter, because they do.